I did turn it on.
Try it again.
Hello?
Yeah, yeah.
Tell me to turn it on. You didn't turn it on.
I did.
Okay. So yes, we did hit the record.
Did you look at the comments? Or was that just the, okay, it was just a Victoria problem.
Okay. Yeah, and they can hear. I checked with them. They can hear.
No, she's saying that it stayed on one slide the whole time last night, but no one else had that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, so just, this is kind of going to cover a review of what we did last night. I'll try to go through as much as I can without repeating too much, but the repetition I found has helped all of us. So we're discussing the Battle of Ipsus, a battle that happened over 2,000 years ago. So the Battle of Ipsus is the story of the 2016 election. And it's amazing to look at a battle fought over 2,000 years ago, and that would be this battle back here in history, that when it's broken down, it can explain to us the 2016 election through parables. And that's the other part. I think I didn't mention that last night when I had that sheet that talked about the 3 parts of the Midnight Cry. I don't know if this is right. I think it is kind of right to say, but it adds to it, is that it seems like there's 3 parts of the Midnight Cry when it comes to what Brother Tyler seems to be focusing on, the United States Constitution and all the history of the United States. Parables. It seems like that's what God's given Parmenter to do, and then the presentations by Sister Tess. It seems like all 3 are very interlinked and needing to know all of them. So anyway, so through parables in this history, we're understanding and being able to see by God opening up our eyes and helping us to see the story of the 2016 election in a battle over 2,000 years ago. There's 2 sides in this, that the two are fighting in the 2016 election for the 3 allies to control and dominate them. And if we remember, Antigonus means like the ancestor, and I wrote a lot of this up there for those on, we have the notes, but the notes are also for those, they all have them online, but also they're going to be posted with the videos as well, so anybody can have access to the notes. If we find an editor, we'll edit them first and get rid of the typos. So Antigonus is equal to or like the ancestor, meaning you can do a compare and contrast. You can do a comparison there, put a comparison to Antigonus. And anti means like or comparison to, and gonus means ancestor. So in the story of Greece, this ancestor was Alexander the Great. In Antigonus, we see the falling apart of Greece, but we have Antigonus and Alexander showing the beginning and the end of his empire. So Antigonus equals then Alexander, in a sense the same person, they're doing the same work. And that's one reason that Daniel can go from 1 Alexander to the 4, skipping those 22 years of history, because what he's demonstrating is the empire builder from the beginning of the empire to the end of the empire. Alexander's work is continued by Antigonus. It's when Antigonus is killed that work ends. And that work of his was reconstructing and uniting the one empire. We don't want to miss the point. What was Antigonus doing to Alexander's empire? He's reorganizing it and reconstructing it. Alexander's work was to try and unite this huge empire, and Antigonus is doing the same thing, uniting this empire. Even historians recognize they were doing the same work. Once Antigonus is killed, they mark that as the end of the empire. And who does Antigonus represent? And we went through that last night. Hillary Clinton. And who is making America great again? This one might be hard for people to swallow. Prophetically, what are we looking at? If one is seeking to destroy by uniting church and state, and the other one, despite the things that they may represent that we disagree with, they're not bringing in the union of church and state. There's principles being protected there for us and allowing us our freedom. So when Antigonus is killed, or Hillary Clinton is killed, then the empire is killed. So we have this story of an empire, and we can mark it as an alpha and omega. Whatever made America great in the first place, whatever was happening in that early history, is the work that Obama and Hillary Clinton were doing in uniting that empire. We have an alpha and an omega. We can say one is Alexander and one is Antigonus. And if we're to stick with people, using people as our example, we have then George Washington and then Clinton being the other one. So Antigonus is like the ancestor, so he's like, or he is Alexander. Hillary Clinton is the representing the separation of church and state, and putting her at the end here and George Washington at the beginning. So Alexander lines up with George Washington, the alpha, and Antigonus is the omega, the end of the empire, which marks the 2016 election as the end of the empire. That work goes on for 200 plus years. Antigonus is over 80 years and he's undefeated, which I think is interesting. If he's undefeated for 80 years, you look at the United States, it's had many battles. And if you look at the battle that pertains specifically to the union of church and state, it's been under attack in many different histories, but it was never defeated as it is now. And again, going back to what we talked about last night, 1979 to 1989, we should have seen it coming if we didn't have our political hat on, instead had our prophetic hat on. We would have known that it's the Protestants. And if we line up with those conservatives, then we're lining up with the Protestants. And we're actually playing a role, whether we knew it or not, in welcoming in this union without even knowing it. And I thank God for his mercy that he's showing us this now, that we could correct our mistakes and repent. He faces his last battle, and they're fighting three allies in the Battle of Ipsus with Antigonus. We have Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus. Both of these men with separate armies, Demetrius and Antigonus, are taking on the three allies. Demetrius has an ally or general working for him, and that's Pyrrhus. Demetrius is supported in his work by the king of the south, in an alliance with the king of the south. So when we come to the 2016 election, what are these two people trying to defeat or take over or control? And review again, because we went through that last night. They want to take down, I think I put it back here, they want to take down the three branches of government. You've got Clinton and Trump, with Trump supported by Putin. And they want to take down the three branches of government. Hillary Clinton isn't trying to control Donald Trump's life. She wants the three allies. She doesn't want to take Trump down or control his life. They're not fighting over each other's property. She doesn't want to take Trump Tower from him. In this battle, they both want the same thing. The two, Clinton and Trump, from that angle are in unison. They both want the three branches of government, beginning with the executive branch, the presidency. So when we get to 2016, Trump has all these business interests. Is that what Hillary's trying to get? She's not interested in what he has. And he's not trying to take from her belongings and land. What do they both want? Antigonus is not wanting what Demetrius has. Demetrius has his land, and his land that does not belong to his father. He has his own navy and his own cities. Antigonus doesn't want to take Demetrius's cities away from him. Demetrius isn't trying to take Antigonus's land. In that sense, they're not fighting each other. They both want the three allies, Seleucus, Cassander, Lysimachus, to control. It's not their own belongings, it's something they're both striving for. In 2016, they want to control all three branches of the US government. World War II explains that in more detail, because in World War II, there are three allies, and we went through that again last night. We have their three allies here. And when Hitler begins World War II, what does he take? Poland, which is one of those three allies. At the beginning of the war, on the Western Front, there are three allies. He takes only one ally, just Poland. At the beginning of World War II, you can see just one is taken. War is different 2,000 years ago. What might be a battle back in history, in our history, can turn into trench warfare. So you don't see just one battle. You see an invasion that lasts for years. Without proving it, Seleucus equals the executive branch. I think she goes on and says that later on, but I think it pertains also to the elephants that he brings in, and he's the one that destroys Antigonus. So there's another line that comes in going forward. Whether we can tie the legislative and judicial branch to Cassander and Lysimachus, we're not sure how you would choose which represents which. When it comes to 2016, what is Trump running on? And I think we discussed that briefly last night. What was his campaign? What was he doing? Draining the swamp and to take down the establishment. And that was his attack. What was his problem with Hillary Clinton? His number one attack is saying that she's like Obama or the establishment or the swamp. He turns the establishment into a bad thing. And if we can erase all that brainwashing from our mind, is she the establishment? He said she is. So we have to take out all our political sentiments and again look at it prophetically, line upon line. What is it trying? What is the parable? What is the parable of Pyrrhus in World War II showing us in our day? The establishment that we're talking about is that continuing ruling class. What Trump is saying is we need to overthrow the establishment. He calls that ruling class the swamp. There's an element of truth to that, but he brainwashed people into thinking the establishment was something negative because Hillary equals Antigonus. She stands for what George Washington stood for and for what the people who wrote the Constitution stood for. I added this quote in that she didn't read, but I wanted to put it in here. But it seemed like we did pretty good on understanding the political sentiment thing, but I just put it in there from volume 1 of the testimonies. I saw that many would fall this side of the kingdom. God is testing and proving his people, and many will not endure the test of character, the measurement of God. Many will have close work to overcome their peculiar traits of character and without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, and be without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, unrebukable before God and man. Many professed Sabbath keepers will be no more special benefit to the cause of God or the church without a thorough reformation on their part. Many Sabbath keepers are not right before God in their political views. They're not in harmony with God's word or in union with the body of Sabbath-keeping believers. Their views do not accord with the principles of our faith. Sufficient light has been given to correct all who wish to be corrected. All who still retain political sentiments which are not in accordance with the spirit of truth are living in violation of the principles of heaven. Therefore, as long as they thus remain, they cannot possess the spirit of freedom and holiness. Their principles and positions in political matters are a great hindrance to their spiritual advancement. These are a constant snare to them and a reproach to our faith. And those who retain these principles will eventually be brought just where the enemy would be glad to have them, where they'll be finally separated from the Sabbath-keeping Christians. These brethren cannot receive the approval of God while they lack sympathy for the oppressed colored race and are at variance with the pure Republican principles of our government. God has no more sympathy with rebellion upon earth than with the rebellion in heaven, when the great rebel questioned the foundation of God's government and was thrust out with all who sympathized with him in his rebellion. So our political sentiments have kept us from being able to see clearly what we needed to be seeing, to be a people that are separate and distinct from the ways that the world is, to bring us up higher to heavenly ways. And I was reading also a couple of days ago, one point that I wanted to add for those that have the study Bible, Numbers chapter 11, I believe it is. In the very end of chapter 10, it's talking about the 3 days journey that they were on. And then picks up in 11, I think, where it says, after these 3 days. We know that 3 days is very significant. But her commentary in there is going to refer back to, because it goes on about diet and such, and you could take that literally for them, but apply it to us spiritually today. And I'm not going to go into detail about it, but the point that I wanted to make is many of us in this room were baptized back in April. And if I'm understanding correctly, that represents our baptism. The children of Israel had their time at Mount Sinai. They saw the miracles. They got to Mount Sinai. They have the 10 Commandments read to them. And what did they say? All that the Lord has said, that will we do. How many times did they say it? 3 times, right? So you get into chapter 11, and they're murmuring and complaining. And her commentary says that prior to Mount Sinai and the miracles, there was, I'm going to say it probably wrong, but what I got out of it, there was grace. But after they made this covenant, their murmuring became rebellion. And I know that everybody knows that passage, that rebellion is the sin of witchcraft. Is that right? So there's something to be said there about, as we continue to go forward when it comes to like political sentiments and things that are going to hinder us, that because we were all baptized, we need to really think about these things because they're now applying to us. So we know that as we entered into this covenant, they entered into that covenant. They still had many things to learn. We still have many things to learn. But the murmuring and the complaining, she refers to as rebellion. It wasn't rebellion before, but it was rebellion now. So going into this battle, Antigonus had one eye. We considered also this symbology in saying that the 2 horns are here represented by his 2 eyes. Prior to this battle, what happened? In the battle long ago, he loses an eye, so he's blinded in one eye. And what does that tell us? He starts off with 2 and he loses 1. So the United States starts off with 2 horns and it loses 1. And we discussed that last night when the Protestant horn fell. So the horn breaks, and that was Protestantism. So he goes into this battle with 1 eye. This is Ipsus now, 2016. He goes into this battle with only 1 horn. The United States goes into this battle. If the Protestant horn is broken, what does his other eye represent? It represents the Republican horn. In the Republican horn, so when Hillary Clinton is defeated, we can identify that the Republican horn is broken. We know once that is broken, it cannot be taped back together again. Another reason to say we are in the history of the last president. So we do have, I did do my, what I could limit, my limitations in artwork, but the 2 horns, 1 being broken, and then he also has 1 eye that is put out early in his life. And so when he enters Ipsus, he has 1 eye. When we entered 2016, we had 1 eye. So back to Demetrius again then. What his name meant was Demeter, right? I always have trouble saying that. Demeter. And the goddess of corn and harvest. They would teach when it came time for winter, Demeter would go to visit the god of Hades and hell. In the 6 months when she was with him in the winter, when it was cold, then she would come back in the time of harvest. She's known as the goddess of corn and harvest. So again, we went through that last night, that without Donald Trump, if he represents Demetrius, without Donald Trump, he's the representing Demetrius, he's representing harvest. So without Donald Trump, we don't have a harvest. And we're not going to go through to the end of this without coming to a harvest. So praise the Lord, we're at the coming up on the harvest. And may we all be found faithful. A couple of things we want to note. First of all, in 2016, the Republican horn was broken. Antigonus was killed, representing that history of empire builders. Demetrius becomes king, although he becomes king as a weak king because these 3 allies are still not his friends. And so he's a weak king. You look at the 2016 here, he's got the executive branch. We talked about it too, that Trump wasn't strong because he didn't have them all yet, and it's a process of time to get them all under his control. So Demetrius is representing being a weak king. Trump is still weak because he doesn't have full control. But we can see that through his tactics, he's reining that in over a period of time. We need to come to a couple of conclusions. First, whatever America was created to be, if we consider it as an alpha and omega, we're going to mark Antigonus or Clinton or Obama. And what conclusion can we come to? What was Antigonus doing? He was restoring, healing, building the empire. The same work as George Washington and Roosevelt and Abraham Lincoln. This isn't a story where it becomes weak in that history, that somehow Obama brought in taxes and we're being taxed more, and so he's a communist and a socialist and he's destroying the horn of republicanism. The horn of republicanism is represented by that separation of church and state and what's in the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. and that all men were created equal, and many other things, which I know I need to brush up immensely on. The other conclusion we need to see, without going into the proofs, that when we come to Raphi and Panium, there's going to be no huge change. And that kind of goes back to that little sheet that I gave you. Understanding the date is not as needful for us as understanding what it represents, because many still may be believing they're going to see some great event. This makes it that much more important that we have the right perspective now. And it's the same thing for the Sunday law. And we were discussing over there about the Sunday law being not an actual Sunday law. That'll be very hard to swallow for many people, and especially if we go to Adventism to go give it, that there's not going to be an actual Sunday law, that it's the union of church and state means accepting a spurious Sabbath. We're wanting to bring into our study Hillary's morality. We want to feel better about making the mistake we made by questioning her morality or behavior or strange beliefs. And that's a dangerous thing to do. We can bring any U.S. president, for all the arguments we make against Clinton in this movement. We don't see anyone questioning George Bush Jr. for going to war for no reason, where they killed hundreds of thousands of people. That is morally questionable as well. We treat her in a different way and not sure why that is. Perhaps it's where she came from. But we attack her in ways that we do not attack other presidents. The problem with doing that now is that we cannot go into prophecy and justify that. Maybe we still carry political views that keep us from seeing what our prophetic lines teach us. The kings in the statue weren't that moral either. We use that as a band-aid to cover our mistake. Our mistake is greater than not recognizing who would win in 2016, based on the idea that he's richer, therefore he should be president. This wasn't a choice between two bad options where we get to choose the richer one. This makes us question how much we understand republicanism and what apostate Protestantism is trying to do. So again, going back to the period of 1979, 1989, there are many other things that happened, but going back to the raising up of the moral majority and them now connecting with the Republicans. So the union of church and state was beginning way back then. And by not knowing that that's what a Sunday law represents, we're still sitting and waiting for a Sunday law. So now we have people in this movement saying that they agree with these studies, but it's good that Trump won because Hillary Clinton was worse. And she would have brought around the Sunday law faster. The problem with that is its rebellion to prophecy, because the person in alliance with the King of the South is the only one on this board, where we've got it all written up here, that represents harvest at the end of this empire. I think I have, that's supposed to say King of the North. Read your notes, you might want to note that, because it's referring to Donald Trump. He's the one that represents harvest on the end of the empire. And then people want to spend the last months of probation that we have left going through Hillary Clinton's emails to prove that she was a bad person to justify our mistakes. And 5 years after our Sunday law in 2014, if we're almost to Daniel 12:1, and we realize that we had gone through the history of Sunday law, our Sunday law, and the loud cry with these mistakes, I think we should be going back and asking ourselves why we made them and not justifying them. The evidence for this conclusion only gets stronger and stronger. Not everything has been presented yet, not every evidence. It only adds weight and makes our mistakes more serious. And for those you guys here, if you do jump in with us on the Sabbath, if you do choose to do that, we're going to continue through. There's 46 of these classes, and you could pick up with us where we're at, because a lot of these things that she's referring to are going to come up in those future classes. And for those of us who have been there, I think you can ask them all personally, but I myself was really grateful for the way, I know the Lord worked it out, that brought us to do this. The whole exit from Sac Central, Sac Fellowship, you put the name up on the board, it was like, it just happened overnight. And one thing I knew is that I didn't know this well enough myself to teach it, and I needed quality time to study it. And with everything else that I do and all the DVDs and everything else, I was lacking myself. There was hundreds of presentations, it seems like, being posted a month, and it's like, who can keep up with all that? I mean, even I mean, I was one that was keeping up with everything, and I couldn't keep up anymore. So I needed quality time, and the Lord just put all that in place that we started doing. And if you remember right, we only did one class that first time. We were going to still maintain our afternoon study, and everybody else said, hey, can we do 2 of these meetings? And I was, praise the Lord, because 46 classes would be beyond November, and I wanted to have them done. So we're going to get through them a lot faster. So if you guys join us where we're at, you'll be able to pick up and be, you know, I just, we understand, because I don't know how to say it. I don't want to mean it. I don't mean it bad at all. But I just want to see us all catch up and all be literally fulfilling the prayer of Jesus, that we all be one, because we're getting prepared to go to battle. And so if the results is in them, and I know I'm praising the Lord for what I've come to understand better, that if you jumped in with us, it would probably be really beneficial for all of us, because your interaction is also important to us. We all interact with one another. There's a lot I don't understand. She can answer some of those things, or what she doesn't understand, somebody else jumps in. There's a lot of thoughts that are put out there, and together we come together with understanding, working it through. And so your input would be beneficial to us as well. So we took a different perspective, and this is the history of Pyrrhus, Ipsus in 301 BC. Then we went into the history of World War II, and we saw the invasion of Poland, and that gave us a little bit of additional information, a repeat and enlarge of the battle of the same story. In World War II, we don't see Antigonus and Demetrius. So up here, you had Antigonus and Demetrius in this battle here against the 3 allies. But in World War II, you don't have that. And I think we touched on that last night too, that by this time Hitler's already in power. So that would, in a sense, represent Trump's already in power at this mark. So, and he's in alliance with Putin. And we have mark in September. I think it's 9 days later. 9 days after the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, I think it is, would be in here. And then he invades Poland. And that begins war on the Western Front. But he has 3 allies he wants to conquer, and he wants to conquer them. Does everybody remember why he wants to conquer those 3 allies? Huh?
Territory.
Yeah, but
So
he had a bigger goal. Huh?
So he could go after Russia.
So he could go after Russia. And he couldn't fight Russia with them in the way. So he gets in this alliance with Stalin, which still puzzles me. Why would Stalin do that? And it's like, he had his own purpose.
He was selling militaries.
Right. Right.
Stalin was trying to weaken Hitler.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, trying to weaken. He thought he could weaken Hitler through this. Okay. Yeah. So he wants to take down those 3 allies. You get to 2016, Trump wins the election due to an alliance with Putin, with the King of the South. He wins the election, and he begins war on the Western Front. He has 2 other allies that he wants to conquer. Because what's his ultimate purpose? Huh? Russia. You have 2 superpowers. Again, after 1989, you saw that you come down to the United States and be the superpower. So this King of the South resurrects, right? And he comes along the scene, and now the world is recognizing 2 superpowers again. Wait a second, that superpower was gone. That superpower is here, and Donald Trump wants to be the sole ruler.
So does that mean up at the top you thought there was a typo, but maybe not, because Trump was in alliance with the King of the South?
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So it's not a typo.
Yeah, probably you're right. Thank you. Thank you. Everybody, I hope everybody got that. So it's Trump is the one that represents harvest, but he's in alliance with the King of the South. It's hard being up here. So, okay, so why don't we see, let me go back to where I was at. In World War II, we don't see Antigonus and Demetrius. So Hitler doesn't have somebody with him like Demetrius did. Who's taking on the 3 allies in World War II? It's a king and a kingdom, and that's Hitler. Where is Antigonus and Demetrius in that story? Hitler is supported by the Soviet Union. Demetrius is supported by Pyrrhus. Where is Antigonus? He's not there. This isn't a story of Antigonus and Demetrius because Hitler has already come into power. We would need other layers to understand that history, but what is the repeat and enlarge? What we can learn from World War II, what can we learn from World War II that we can't learn from Pyrrhus? What we do learn from the beginning of what do we learn from the beginning of World War II? Hitler is taking on 3 allies, September 1939, beginning with the invasion of Poland. In this story, you have Demetrius and Antigonus fighting 3 allies, but this gives us more understanding of the battle. So we're referring to, in this story here, you have Demetrius and Antigonus fighting the 3 allies, but this gives us more understanding of that battle. So who does Hitler attack in 1939? We've discussed that several times. We're talking about Poland. He takes it quickly. But in the story of Antigonus and Demetrius, we don't see that. We don't see that taking of something quickly like that. So we can see a repeat and enlarge. Now Hitler, the king of the north, supported by the king of the south, takes on these 3 allies, and he takes Poland. If this is the 2016 election, Donald Trump is taking on the 3 branches of the US government. And what does he take quickly? The executive. So he takes on these 3 branches, but what was he attacking? What he is attacking or trying to capture is the executive branch, and he takes it fairly quickly.
Can I just point something out that I think is interesting? His war on the Western Front is between France and Britain, but he made a deal with Stalin to not attack him while he takes Poland, which is closer to Russia and helps him to get to Russia when he attacks Russia.
Yeah.
So Putin helped Trump get executive branch, which is going to help him destroy Putin in the end, but it's just the same weird. He helped him get the power he needed.
Yeah.
To get closer to destroying.
To get closer to his own. That's why it puzzled me. Maybe they should read their Bibles too and understand. But because God is, but God put it into the parable understanding and such for a group of people that would go and proclaim these things and tell the world and warn the world when it's going to become very black and white.
Yeah, everybody hear that?
Yeah.
Repeat for them.
I can't do that. You have to.
Poland is the biggest geographical area separating Germany and Russia.
Can they hear that, do you think?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that'll show up on Moon, yeah.
Okay, they can probably hear it. You can turn your mic on probably.
No.
Did Hitler take Poland pretty quick?
So so he takes out Poland purposely to make his way easier to Stalin.
And Stalin lets him.
And Stalin lets him.
He'll get a war on the West, so he'll preoccupy.
Yeah. I think it would.
Russia had their own ambitions too. I mean, there's so much as Russia
Yeah, no,
wanted the nickel in Finland, so Russia actually, while Hitler was doing what he was doing, Russia was invading other countries too. So just the dynamics of what took place is pretty involved.
I've shared with people before, when it comes to war, it's like, well, I'm not a war person. So is it safe to say that back in that time, they were the 2 superpowers, right? Isn't that what made it a world war?
Yeah, I mean,
To some extent?
yeah, Britain and France as well, yeah, and Germany.
And so Hitler wanted to be the sole superpower, right?
I mean, even as superpowers back then,
There weren't superpowers yet.
yeah.
Okay.
Russia,
Okay.
Because there's other factors why Russia didn't want war with Germany. They were building up to it, but Germany actually, Hitler, one of the things he did was he told Stalin, he dropped a dime on a bunch of his generals. So Stalin, shortly before World War II started, executed like 200 or 300 of his generals. He sent them to the Gulag, wherever it was, and he had them executed. So when Germany actually attacked them, all his experienced generals were gone. And Hitler intentionally did that.
Disinformation.
Was that, yeah, it literally, there was an information, exactly, there was an information war going on back then. They were doing things to each other, to undermine, but Russia didn't have the military prowess to take on Germany at that point, and so Stalin was trying to build that up, and America was actually helping Russia. There were a lot of dynamics.
We could probably put this up here, maybe that would help.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay, because that might help him too. Maybe you can see if that helps him. Okay, so what does Hitler do in World War II? He's taking Poland quickly, and now it's a long, drawn-out war with France and Britain. We can say clearly, based on prophecy, when we look at America and see it is in trouble, that war on the Western Front is the internal fight, as Trump tries to control the whole of the government, courts, everything. The history of World War II gives us more detail. So, again, taking on those three allies, but it's a process of time to get to the point where he then takes on Russia. And we know that's coming when it comes to Panion. So let's see, I don't know if I'm going to have room to put all that on there. Maybe I will. For the board, maybe I'll put it up there before the next time. For those that do have the notes, it's just a little bit more detail, and it's on the screen for these guys, but I'll put it up here too afterwards. But in 2016, I'm kind of bad at talking and writing at the same time. In 2016, what you have is battle after battle after battle. It's an invasion, not like what they did 2,000 years ago. They met on the battlefield, they did their slaughter, and go from there. But this is an invasion, and it's going to be battle after battle after battle after battle. And that, so anyway, so we also considered that this is the Western Front. And right here, the Western Front, lining up with the invasion of Poland. It's an invasion here. The Western Front begins in 2016. When does the Eastern Front begin? And what is the Eastern Front? That's Raffia. Once Raffia comes around, now there's war on the Eastern Front. And I will put that up here because we're going to have. So we have a battle here, and we're going to begin war on the Eastern Front. And so what is it going to look like? How do we know what the Eastern Front is going to look like? By comparing and contrasting and going back to the beginning. Same as the Western Front. So that will look the same. Will be information war. Just based on this structure, how would we prove that? Raffia begins war on the south, but when does World War II begin? With the invasion of Poland. Where is that on our line? Well, we've marked that at 2016. And what does the Eastern Front look like? It looks like the Western Front. So how Trump is fighting now, we can understand how he's going to fight then. So how he's fighting here in the Western Front. What does he use as his main weapon?
Information.
Yeah, what else? I mean, yeah.
Collusion.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's Twitter too. I mean, yeah, there's a whole lot of answers, but it's Twitter, right? I find it amazing that people don't recognize that he attacks people more than anyone I think I've ever witnessed, and he attacks them back with the same attacks that they say on him. And when they attack him, they're attacking what he's actually done that is wrong, and he turns around and uses the same attack on them. And it's just amazing that people. I really believe that that's God leading it to black and white. When we were talking at breakfast, that it's going to make it black and white, that they're going to see it. So let's see. So it looks like the Western Front. So how Trump is fighting now, we can understand how he's going to fight then. There were some changes in scenery, but the method of warfare was essentially the same. 2016 is an invasion. And that's where we see it. It's an invasion here. Raffia is an invasion. And then there you have the invasion of Poland. And then Operation Barbarossa is the invasion of the Soviet Union. And I don't have that on here, but that will be Raffia, which would be Barbarossa. And it's an invasion. And you have an invasion here. And you can carry your invasion here and your invasion at Raffia. So it's interesting when you come to this history that we don't see battles. A battle 2,000 years ago even brought through, in this history, there's battle after battle after battle in 2,000 years ago. It's not like long ago where there would be one battle and then you would withdraw. Long ago, you would have a battle like Ipsus or Raffia, meet on the field, and I think I just covered that, and fight. There's a victor or a loser, essentially in 1 or 2 days, and then you would withdraw and the fight is over. But invasion doesn't look that way. Now it's just the beginning of a war, and there's many battles in that history. It starts to change our idea of what this conflict looks like, also how much we expect to see at Raphia. But also it puts us, this is where we need prayer and discernment when it comes to the two streams of information, in having in praying for wisdom. Long ago when I first began my Bible reading, I remember reading what Solomon asked for, and I thought, that sounds like a really good thing to ask for wisdom and understanding. We need wisdom when it comes to the two streams of information, because we do need to be able to see these things that are happening. You know what I'm saying? As we see it develop, we need to be able to see these things, and we were supposed to be able to know of this long ago. So we need to be able to see these things. So 2016 to Raphia is a history of failure. That would be this period here. If we went to the history of the counterfeit, where we compare the true and the counterfeit, we can see 1945 lines up with Panium. But this is a disappointment to the papacy. Is Panium a disappointment for the papacy? No. Panium, the king of the north, conquers the king of the south, right? He receives a deadly wound, and then it's processed for him to die. So when we have a history of failure, such as World War II, we haven't gone far enough in our studies to yet prove that. But when it comes to a battle between the king of the north and the king of the south, you switch who attacks who and who wins. And I haven't sent that out yet, but Adriana made up the little graph for me. It's still in my email, the little graph for me, because I need it for my own personal reference as we continue to go through our studies, because she's going to progress and go through the studies to show the lines of failure. And those are areas that I've watched the presentations. I get it when I see it, but I don't have the ability to remember it and grasp it all. So I just want to emphasize again, our studies have been helping me, and I think others, to grasp these things. So we'll be going into those studies as well, of understanding the lines of success and the lines of failure.
It's a really easy pattern. You have two of one king and then one of the last one. So you have two king of the north wins and then one king of the south at the end. That's the history of failure. The history of success is two king of the south wins, then the king of the north wins. So
thank you.
it has to end with the king of the north winning. That's the history of success.
That's the history of success. So at Operation Barbarossa, when we see Russia attacked, you would see, instead of the king of the south being attacked, you'd see at Raphia the king of the north being attacked in our history. In 1945, the king of the north loses at the Battle of Panium. The king of the north wins. So who's under attack at Raphia? The king of the north. That's when Putin attacks us. It's difficult, and keep in mind what we said before in the notes, earlier in the notes, that we're not going to expect to see some great change. We're going to need to see it because we're studying this message, because we're keeping up with the events that are happening. We're going to see through the lines what it represents. So it's difficult, and it shows how parables can be limited when we try to imagine what an ancient battle looks like in history. In World War II, we can see it's an invasion. It's not the major events of one day we might see very little happen, but all through that history, you're going to see battles essentially. Who won at that invasion? Hitler covered a fair amount of territory, but it would have taken a long time to actually understand how that tide of battle is even going, or what direction, who is coming out the victor. It's not easy to see or clear cut. So we're looking at this history a few different ways from different perspectives. We've already started overlaying two different histories, Pyrrhus and World War II. In our time, we're taking the battle of the king of the north versus the king of the south, and over this history, placing the history of Pyrrhus, who's fighting Demetrius, the king of the south and the king of the north. And then we're going to overlay Stalin versus Hitler. What we need to consider to overlay this history is Ptolemy and Seleucus, and that takes you into the other perspective, which will be more so going forward. Because we know that they also play a part in this history. This is where we actually get to the terms Raphia and Panium in the first place, by understanding Ptolemy and Seleucus in Daniel chapter 11. This is verses 11 and 12 for those that have are familiar with that.
Was it Seleucus? I thought it was Antigonus at Raphia. Ptolemy and Antigonus. Am I
Antigonus dies at Ipsus.
Not Antigonus.
Antiochus.
Antiochus? Yeah. It wasn't Seleucus. It was an A name for the north.
You might want. I took this straight out of her notes, so maybe I don't know if he's doing this study. So, and he comes up later. He comes up later, and
It was
just
the same A name for 3 different battles up in the north.
We're not going to read when we get to this. When we get through the notes, we're not going to read the last page or so. But I did put in the Daniel in the Revelation by Uriah Smith, the commentary for your reading afterwards. So you might find it in those back notes too. Okay, so this is where we actually get the term Raphia and Panium in the first place by understanding Ptolemy and Seleucus in Daniel chapter 11. Raphia is aligning with Operation Barbarossa, the 23rd of August. There's an invasion, and they're on the same side all the way up to Operation Barbarossa. That's where war begins on the Eastern Front. We need to consider that the Western Front is largely internal. The Eastern Front is where we get the King of the North and the King of the South. Seleucus, right? And
I'm pretty sure it's Antiochus. Yeah.
we'll check it out in the break, and because if it is, then she's saying Seleucus, because
It might have been a slip, but this 3 allies, Lysimachus, because you have the first 22 years, the last and the 4th Diadochi War is the Macedonian War. Then you have that brief 3 or 4 year period of the 4 horns, and then Cassander dies. Yeah, I think Cassander dies, and then you have Lysimachus, Seleucus, I don't think, no, by that point you have Antiochus in the north.
So you're asking who are the 3 allies?
No, not who are the 3 allies.
The Battle of Raphia.
The actual Battle of Raphia.
Antiochus.
It was Antiochus and Ptolemy.
Yeah. It
Well,
was
Okay.
the Philopator, I believe it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, however you say it, but it's
Okay.
the vicious one.
it's Antiochus, so Antiochus Magnus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
We'll have to go back and I'll correct the notes.
And it was him again in Panium.
I noticed
And I
sometimes
think it
when
was
she's...
He's at
before, too.
1989, Raphia and Panium,
Yeah.
that same person, historically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So correction for everybody, and we'll all go back. And I found that each of us have found little things like, and we all do it. I know I say the wrong word when I'm doing something, and but I found that it's really been good because sometimes I might already know a particular topic that's being discussed, and if I hear her say another word, I catch it and I go back and look it up too. That one I didn't catch. So it's at Raphia, it's Ptolemy and Antiochus. Is that how you say it? Antiochus.
I always call it wrong. It's on your page 8. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
on your
it does
page
say it.
8.
Okay, good. Okay. So World War II is trying to teach us something different. When we started considering that history, we talked about 1933, and this was in a previous study. I don't think we touched on that last night, and Hitler's rise to power. But it's separate and distinct history. If we consider our lines in 303 BC, neither of these men are kings. Pyrrhus isn't in control of his kingdom in 303, neither is Demetrius. In this history of World War II, August 23rd, 1939, they're both kings, Stalin and Hitler. When we come down to 2014, one's a king and one isn't. In 303, there's an alliance. It's open. Everyone knows about it. In World War II, August 23rd, 1939, history, in the World War II history, it's half open and half secret. That was the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, that it was half open and half secret. In our history, it's all secret. It's all, this whole history, we don't have, like they had the secret and the open of the pact. Down here, it's all secret. We can go through and mark differences, and one of the differences is that Hitler is already in power there. You're not going to observe the change in the German government. We would need other lines to show that. This is just showing Hitler as the King of the North already, which we're observing Trump is already being seen as the King of the North. And that becomes an important thought when we understand that 2014 is Sunday law. Where does Sunday law come from? We've been discussing that. It comes from the King of the North. We shouldn't be looking to 2014 for a Sunday law from Obama. We can see it from Trump, but that's a different study. We can't see a Sunday law from Obama. Apostate Protestantism is not speaking through Obama. They're doing everything they can to have him removed. It's talking about 2014. We're not going to see a church-state relationship. It's the opposite. They're trying to kill him symbolically. Obama doesn't speak for apostate Protestantism, and Trump does. So Obama is not going into a church-state relationship. That's really amazing when you think about it, because when we were talking last night about how he changed his affiliation many times, and if he always wanted to have this power over the whole world, amazing that you grow, I guess people grow up with dreams like that. I don't know what goes through these people's minds, but to think that you wanted to have power, and yet he just, I know it's not coincidental, that he winds up as for such a time as this, that he latches on to the Republicans, and the Republicans are the very ones that are going to be linked to the Protestants, that are going to bring in the union of church and state, that are going to cause this world to worship all the beasts and have that one world that he wants.
What's his name?
Yeah, ruler of the world. So Obama is not going into a church-state relationship. So how do we see a Sunday law in 2014? By comparing and contrasting, it's easy to see where the Sunday law has to come from. It's hard to see from Obama. We would have to see it come from the right wing, from Reagan, a Republican, George Bush at 9/11, Republican, on the witness of 2 or 3, Republican. We know it comes from the right wing, so why do we mark it at 2014? The right wing is very active in 2014. They're working hard, but in secret. Not the president, he's not a king yet. Internal and external, compare and contrast, but that's a different study. So how long is Raffia? We're not meant to yet know that. We do know that's where we're headed, but we don't know how much time that's in. And I think that from my understanding, who was it? I think it was Sister Kathy Brown that actually mentioned too that she asked me a question. She goes, aren't we already in Raffia? And then right after that, I started hearing it being talked about that we're actually in Raffia. I don't know if you have anything on that, but that we're actually in Raffia. That so we don't know how long it is though. We know enough to know this is November 9, our close of probation. If this is our close of probation, we know we've got a history of making mistakes. If we sort out what has gone wrong in our past history, then we get into the dispensation when we're supposed to know how long Raffia is. So if everybody's seen, I think, the studies in Canada where they break down within each dispensation, and you have a Concord, Exeter, right? So everybody's at Boston, Concord, Exeter, you have closed probation. So when we get into this history, we'll see more, we'll have information, because each one has a increase of knowledge, a formalization, and then a test. So in this history, you'll have the same thing, an increase of knowledge, a formalization of the message, and a test. So when we get into that dispensation, we'll know. God will tell us how long this history is. We didn't know in 2014 when Raffia was. We didn't know how long Ipsus would go for. We have to wait until we're in that history. And if we're worried about close of probation, we shouldn't be worried about when our second advent is. In other words, don't worry about how long this is and when it ends. We need to be focused on what here and make sure we have this part right, which we talked about last night. Especially since we know we've made mistakes, serious mistakes about our Sunday law. And that's why we're laboring our history from 2016 to 2019. By understanding the two fronts, the Western and the Eastern front, we can see that there is battle after battle after battle, and not just one point in time. So, yeah, I'm going to have a whole bunch here to correct, because I think that even the next study has Seleucus in here.
Yeah, it does.
So,
But she also clarifies that these are the descendants of Seleucus.
Yeah.
And Ptolemy.
thank you. So that's probably,
Antiochus, Seleucus bred and ended up with Antiochus.
okay. Because she does use Seleucus through this whole thing. I was thinking, well, maybe it was just once, but no,
Antiochus was the 6th ruler of the Seleucid.
she says it's their children that do it. Yeah, it's their children that do it. Okay. That's why okay, now I remember why she has Seleucus in here. So we're going to move to begin to look more at Ptolemy now and Seleucus going into our next study. And that history we find in Daniel 11, where we get the battles of Raphia and Panium. We just want to make one point, working backwards, reading verses 13 to 15. For the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. So what is happening in these verses? Anybody?
King of the South is defeated.
Yeah, I don't have it in the notes, but so the king of the south is defeated. The king of the north comes against the king of the south, and the king of the south is defeated. What battle? This is beginning backwards. So what battle are we reading right here? And she says it. We're reading Panium, because she's going to go start at Panium and work backwards. So when do we see the king of the south defeated? We know that's Panium, the literal battle of Panium, and it's why we write Panium on our reform line. We can see this battle in the verses. This is Seleucus and Ptolemy. Not so literally, because this is their descendants. So yeah, I pick up things along the way, and then I remember things along the way, but I forgot that point was in there, why she says Seleucus, because it's their descendants. And she goes on into that in the next study as well, too. So it's 200 BC, and it's Panium. I think we'll go ahead and, I don't know what time it is.
1:45.
It's just shy of an hour at this point.
Oh, I'll just go ahead and finish. There's just a little tiny bit more here, and then we'll break. Okay. So in verse 13, the king of the north is returning, and he's bringing a bigger army than he had before. What do we know then has happened before? They had to have fought before, right? So, and I'll draw this up on the board during the break more so. So we know that they have fought before. And this is talking about Panium, and this is a bigger army than what he fought with previously. We find that battle in verses 11 and 12. Just to speak about Panium, we need to make a couple of points as we go through this. Not details we need to memorize, but to look at as we're studying. In 200 BC, the king of the north is Antiochus the third. The king of the south is Ptolemy the fifth, Epiphanes, about 10 years old, 5 years old. I don't think I corrected that in this. There's another spot that is corrected, but he's 5 years old. Not fighting in this battle. It's a general of the king of the south, Scopus of Aetolia. Those are the two leaders fighting. On the part of the king of the north, it's the king, but on the part of the king of the south, it's his general that fights.
He was from Rome, wasn't he? Yeah, that's the Roman general that came to
Yes,
help.
yes, yes. The Ptolemaic kingdom never fully recovered from Panium. Moving forward, we'll look at Raphia and Seleucus and Ptolemy. So there is a little blurb there of each one of them describing who they are. And so when you get to this battle, it's the descendants of Seleucus. Antiochus, I have to remember how to say that. So that is, I'm done with this one. So if everybody's okay with that. So like Tyler said, you get through it faster when you're done what you're doing.
More in this one.
There's
more on the
page 8.
slides.
Oh yeah, it is. I wasn't going to read. I left that for you guys to read. I said that earlier. It's just the commentary on. I'll read the one thing that is there. It's what I put in the notes for everybody for their own reading is just from Daniel and the Revelation, verse 13 to 15. The commentary there. That was all, and probably we're all familiar with it. But there are some neat points in there that I thought. That I kind of highlighted, where he raised an immense army greater than the former, for he had collected many forces and acquired great riches in his eastern expedition. I don't know what that relates to, but you're thinking about
We talked about that in the
Eastern
Bible
Front.
study, remember?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is when, yeah,
The Eastern expedition was when they went to that Indian border
right.
because that king was growing. So they made a concession. They gave him some land and gave him a ton of elephants.
Yeah. Seleucus, yeah. And so, and that comes up because Seleucus is the one that comes, and I think we talked about that last night. Seleucus is the one that comes with the elephants. That
And
puts the
Antiochus.
elephants. Antiochus. Okay. So, and then there was another thing, I think I pulled it up from Wikipedia. From Seleucia on the Tigris, he led a short expedition down the Persian Gulf against the, how do you say that one? Garians of the Arabian coast. And Antiochus seemed to have restored the Seleucid Empire in the east, which earned him the title, the Great Antiochus Magus. In 2005 to 2004, the infant Ptolemy V Epiphanes succeeded to the Egyptian throne, and Antiochus is said, notably by Polybius, to have concluded a secret pact with Philip V of Macedon for the partition of the Ptolemaic possessions. Under the terms of this pact, Macedon was to receive the Ptolemaic possessions around the Aegean Sea and Cyrene, while Antiochus would annex Cyprus and Egypt. Once more, Antiochus attacked the Ptolemaic province of Kol, Syria, and Phoenicia, and by 199 BC, he seems to have had possession of it before the Aetolian leader Scopas recovered it for Ptolemy. But that recovery proved brief, for in 198 BC, Antiochus defeated Scopas at the Battle of Panium, near the sources of the Jordan, a battle which marks the end of the Ptolemaic rule in Judea. So when we go into the next study, like I said, she's going to work backwards, starting at Panium. And the purpose in working backwards is to get to the reason why we have the battles between the King of the North and the King of the South. What began this problem that they would have this battle. So anyway, so we'll go ahead and close in prayer. Dear Father in heaven, Lord, we thank you for your grace. We thank you for your mercy. We thank you, Lord, that you look down upon us and see that we are weak and feeble and slow to understand. But yet your mercy abounds to continue to lead us and teach us and guide us and help us, Father, that we might have greater understanding how the prophecies line up to tell us what is happening, Lord, that our faith might be increased through these studies and through these presentations. Father, we know that we're not deserving of them, and we just want to say thank you and praise you for all your mercy. We pray, Lord, that throughout these studies, we would all come more knit together than we were when we arrived, that we would all seek, Father, to be one with you and one with each other, that we would all strive to encourage one another and to team up together in being able to put together studies and presenting them, that we might be all better prepared for the work that you're calling us to do. I pray, Lord, as well, that throughout this process, what would be developed in us, Father, that we would come to the point that our only ambition would be to reveal your character and to enlarge the kingdom of heaven. So may you continue to bless the studies, Father, that we're presenting here, and bless those that are watching online as well, Lord, that we might have a greater understanding. We praise you and we thank you, and we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Still recording?